We call it the CFCC. And also there are people watching on a video or an audio webcast as well, which is going out simultaneously. So we'd like to welcome you all, and glad to see you're here. We'll start. My name's Stephen Marshall. I work at the Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm a program manager for the program called Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, and I'm going to be doing some of the introductions here. The CFCC is an association of 7 agencies, 5 from the state of California, 2 federal agencies that work cooperatively to provide funding for a wide variety of programs with an emphasis on infrastructure, public works, and public facilities. So that's what today's funding fair, as we call it, is all about, providing information to you about the funding availability for your project. So we'll get started with our program. We'd like to, of course, thank the state EPA for providing, this is the Coastal Room, it's called, and one of the slides, when they're up by the people who are registered on the webcast, they'll be able to kind of send in chat questions, and we'll be taking some questions from you as well. We've got there we are, the agencies involved. The California Department of Public Health, and today the presentation will be by George Fagella, who's a staff environmental scientist with the Capacity Development Program, and he's joined by Pete Stamos, who's a regional funding coordinator. We have the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, commonly referred to as the I-Bank. Tad Thomas will be giving a presentation. He's the municipal finance specialist for the I-Bank. I'll be giving the presentation for the CDBG program. California Department of Water Resources will have a presentation by Leslie Pierce, who's a program manager in the Project Services Office. The State Water Resources Control Board will have a presentation by Megan Tosney, who's a senior engineer and a manager in the Division of Financial Assistance. And she's joined by Christine Wright, who you probably all met when you signed in at the registration table. She's a marketing analyst. And Jim Maughan, Assistant Deputy Director of Division of Financial Assistance. Plus, we're also going to have some opening remarks by Francis Spivey Weber, Vice Chair for the State Water Resource Control Board. Also, we have 2 federal agencies, and as you are probably aware, the federal agencies are in shutdown mode. So I will be substituting and flipping through their PowerPoint so that you can see what their presentation encompasses, but it's not going to have the level of detail we would like you to have. I'm sorry, but I'll do the best I can. And the booklets that you have actually have the full PowerPoint presentation, but we'll just read along and do the best we can. For those of you on the webcast, you can also get the full PowerPoint presentations that are in the workbook by going to our CFCC website, which is www.cfcc.ca.gov. And in the upper left-hand corner, you can click on the workbook or handbook, I forget exactly how they say it on the website, and you can download so that you too can have the PowerPoint presentation to kind of follow along with as we have our presentations. So a little bit of history quickly on the CFCC. It was formally established in 1998 with a memorandum of understanding between 4 agencies, and now we've expanded to 7. And the whole idea was to provide some cooperative work between the agencies. We look to not just foster cooperation, but there's a lot of projects, and you'll see some examples today in some of the slides, of layered financing between the agencies, where a project will come in and get a grant from one or a loan from another agency and work between the agencies for funding, but also just encouraging more efficient use of funds so that you don't duplicate, so that there's some things that we have been working on, like the cross-cutting NEPA environmental assessment forms, income surveys for communities to verify that it's a low-income or disadvantaged community, things like that. So there's been some work between the agencies that hopefully will make it easier on you, the project managers and representatives from cities, counties, water districts, consultants, all of you, to make it easier on your process to get the funding for the much-needed projects throughout the state of California. A little bit of housekeeping and logistics. We will be having a couple of presentations for the first part of the morning, and then we'll take a mid-morning break, come back and have a couple more presentations until we're done with all 7 agencies, at which point we will we'll then close down the webcast, and we'll also ask you all to kind of grab your stuff and step to the side or the back of the room for a couple of minutes, and we're going to rearrange the room so that we can have some tables and chairs set up so that we can have our, what we call our breakout sessions, so you can have kind of one-on-one with the representatives of these 7 agencies. Well, today 5. So you'd be able to bring your exact details and questions on your project to the representatives from the agencies where you feel there's a program that could provide funding for your project. So that's basically some real good one-on-one time, and we'll stay as long as people are here with questions. So that can go on for, we've had funding fairs where that goes on for a good 30 minutes, and some that goes on for 2 hours and 30 minutes, depending on how many people here and what the questions are and how much interest each of you have in talking to all of the agencies. So we'll be here at the end of the day to give you some kind of one-on-one time. I'm supposed to tell you that there's emergency exits. There's one over there, and there's 2 over there where you came in the event of emergency. Highly unlikely, but in the event. For the webcast viewers, if you want to email a question to us, you can email it. It's on one of the slides, so you may have seen it come up already. But we are in the Coastal Room here at the Cal EPA building, and there's a an email address for this room's computer, Coastal Room, COASTALRM @ calepa.ca.gov. So you've probably been seeing it on one of these slides. If you do have a question regarding any specific question about the program that's being presented or the funding sources that are being presented, you can write that in. We may not be able to get back with you today, but at least we'll have an email address and a question that we can get back to you. We also have today 2 guest organizations. One is Rural Communities Assistance Corporation, RCAC. We'd like to thank them. They helped with registration, and they maintain the website for the CFCC. And also California Rural Water Association, CRWA. They also are kind of a co-sponsor. They're a nonprofit that works in conjunction with a number of the agencies at the CFCC. From RCAC today we have Jean Thompson and Mary Fleming, and from CRWA we have John Vandenberg. They will also be available at a breakout session, have a table of their own, because both of those organizations, we'll give you a little bit more information on them later, but both of those organizations also provide gap funding and financing, as well as other technical services and assistance that are really very beneficial to especially smaller jurisdictions and smaller water districts that sometimes don't have the capacity to take on a multi-million-dollar project on the levels that some of you have. I'd like you to now take a quick moment to flip through this book with me, because this is a very, very good resource that you can keep with you. You can take notes during the PowerPoints, but just so you see kind of a history of who we are and all of that and what we do, on the inside cover is a little write-up on what is the CFCC. Starting on page 3 is the membership directories, which is basically, since I didn't bring any of my cards with me today because we just moved at my building, so I don't even have my new cards yet. But All of the contact information is here. Websites, emails, phones, names of each of the program folks. On page 6 is where we start with the PowerPoint presentations, and that goes up through page 40. On page 41, we start with what we call our matrices. Each matrix is just divided into the kind of primary types of projects: water, wastewater, roads, community facilities. So each of the agencies that provides those types of program, funding programs, are listed by program in there. And then if you all take a quick look on page 72, this is one of our kind of a cooperative thing, and it's also a time saver for you. This is our common inquiry form. So if you fill this in with a description of your project, the financing amount that you are looking for, and send this in, it goes to the email through the iBank. They're kind enough to coordinate this process for us. And they will then disseminate it to the other 6 agencies, each of whom will respond individually to you about, is your project eligible, which program at their agency would be most appropriate for a project that you have described, that sort of thing. And they can then further put you further along the line on who to get in touch with, so that you have a direct contact for your project at that agency or that specific program at that agency. So it's a very good form, and I highly recommend that you use this rather than kind of taking a stab in the dark at each agency wondering what they have to offer. And just past the common inquiry form is 3 pages of acronyms. Because what would state government be without acronyms? Okay. With that said, we will start moving on to our presentations. But first, we always like to take a quick audience survey, because we would just want to know who we're presenting to. So, how many of you, this is your very first time you've come to a CFCC funding fair? Great. For those of you who are here a second time or a third time, it's also very beneficial, and for you first-timers, if you want to ever come back again a year later, because each of these agencies will sometimes change their programs, get a new bond issued, that sort of thing. So it's worthwhile to return to get current information as your project goes down the line towards funding, construction, and completion. So good to see all of you here on a first-time participants. How many of you represent or work at a city or county local government? Okay. How many of you work at a private water district or a mutual water district, special services, special district? Okay. Any of you from nonprofits? You can raise your hand more than once. Anyone representing tribal interests or colonias in the southern part of the state? Okay. Any other federal agencies or state agencies? Okay. And educational institutions. We sometimes get junior colleges that work a lot in conjunction with consultants in my program. Did I miss anybody? Okay. If you are at a city or a government or work with a water or special district that represents, say, 10,000, population of 10,000 or under, smaller jurisdictions, city of 50,000 or under, or a county of 200,000 or under, okay, major metropolitan area people, anybody here from Sacramento, San Jose, that kind of thing, okay? So we are going to now kind of get started. Hopefully at the end of the day you'll have a real good idea of who you want to seek out at the breakout sessions, who you want to follow up with, what programs will help your project get funded. We all know that California has more infrastructure needs than funding available. Sometimes these programs are competitive, sometimes they're first come, first serve. This is the information that you're going to get today. Hopefully you'll be able to leave here today with a real good understanding of how your project can move forward down the funding path. So before we get started, I would like again to have Frances Spivey Weber, who's the Vice Chair for the State Water Resources Board. She's just going to give a brief hello. Oops.
Yeah, now it's on. Thank you, and I particularly want to thank the staff who have worked on putting this together. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's a huge service to those who are always a bit befuddled as to how to get money to do projects that need to be done. But that this got put together, I think the one who had the idea was the Department of Agriculture, who's not here today. But it is really a work of love. The staff, I've been impressed since I first joined the board 6 years ago. I've been impressed with this program, and it has only gotten better and better. So, and I would urge you to take the advice that you got, that to come back next year. While yes, there's no money, but there really is money, and there are changes that are happening. And one of the big changes, and since Eric Bayous is not here from EPA or from US EPA, I will give you a little hint as to his presentation. The intersection between energy and water is getting bigger and bigger, and it's getting bigger and bigger through GHG reductions and energy efficiency, where you can build systems that are energy efficient, water systems that are energy efficient, and get funding from PG&E up here, or Southern California Edison, or some other areas. The cap and trade program, which last year had no money for projects, but this year will probably have some money for projects, and that pot of funding will grow. And the areas in which they are interested is water, agriculture, and natural resources, of course, transportation, some other energy as well. So there will be pots of money popping up over time, and so you should stay in touch and come back as often as you can. And again, thank you, all of you, for being here, and thank you for coming, and good luck.
All right, thank you very much. All right. By the way, now would be a very good time to turn off your cell phones if you're here in the room. And like she said, USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, a lot of people don't think USDA when they think of development, but they have the Rural Development Program. And unfortunately, Dave Hartwell, who was one of the founding representatives, he was here since the very beginning in 1998 with the CFCC. But he's not here today. They've kind of locked him out of his computer and restricted him from work. So I'm going to flip through his presentation. So USDA Rural Development, there's the website right there on the first title page, so that you can access a lot of their information directly off the website. The USDA has kind of three main mission areas, as they call it, which is community programs, housing programs, and business cooperative programs. For today, of course, the community programs is what would be the source of funding that would relate to infrastructure, public works, public improvements. They do have other utility programs, so if you are interested in anything for electric programs, sort of like bringing electricity to an isolated rural community, and you needed to upgrade your electric lines, build capacity, telecommunications, that sort of thing. There's two different couple contacts there, because those are the program managers for those specific programs. So the thing about USDA rural development is when they say rural, they mean it. They are talking about population of 10,000 and under for water programs and 20,000 and under for community facilities. So similar in a sense to the CDBG program, there are population restrictions. Other programs have by the number of connections, like utility connections. So if you are dealing with multi-unit, it might be one connection compared to, even though it's a 40-unit building. So each program has their own kind of eligibility limitations and restrictions. USDA is population-based at 10,000 for the water, $20,000 for community facilities. They allow funding to be given directly to nonprofit organizations, to federally recognized Indian tribes, and to public bodies such as we call it at HCD, units of general local government. My absolute least favorite acronym, UGLUGS. So USDA will fund public bodies that are UGLUGS or special districts or mutual water companies. Did I just do two there? Okay. Their community facilities program, I'm not sure if a lot of you are interested here in buildings, but they can fund police and fire stations, including fire engines, health clinics, daycare centers, medical centers. They do this as both loans and grants. Loans have 40-year, you've got to have a useful life of 40 years so that you can have a repayment schedule. And these programs are accepting applications year-round. So it's kind of a first-come, first-serve. When your project is ready, you don't have to wait for an announcement of funding or any notices or a special, deadlines on applications. As soon as you're ready, they'll work with you to help you prepare applications, that sort of thing. On their primary public improvement loans and grant programs, you can fund a wide range of projects. So we didn't actually take a survey here. How many of you actually are mostly interested in water projects, drinking fresh water? How about wastewater and sewer? Pretty fair number. Roadways, paving, drainage, sidewalks, curbs, gutters. Okay. Community facilities, any of you here that are looking towards? Okay. All right, good. USDA has different programs, obviously, for all of those, but it does cover those. You can see landfills, drainage, sewer lift stations, transfer stations, both water and wastewater. Here's a picture of one of the projects that they funded, so you can see this is a pretty significant cost on a project of this sort, right? There's a lot of earth being moved on a project like this, and a lot of steel and tank construction. Groundwater, surface water, treatment, distribution. They can even fund solar energy for your water facilities. So they have programs that really reach out to rural communities that don't have a lot of electric service by helping you build solar into your projects. This is a picture of a treatment, an open pond treatment project that they funded for wastewater. They do loans, grants for water and wastewater. It doesn't matter what's on the screen here. You're going to have to call for what their current interest rate is. They are typically below market, but right now I don't know where exactly it is on USDA. So if you're interested in one of these programs, obviously that's one of the first questions that you'll want to ask, and they're going to want to tell you in how to fund the project and how to pay back any loans that are being placed into the funding. So the special programs that they have for colonias, similar to CDBG, is within 150 miles of the Mexican border. And the Native American grant, they have a $1 million maximum. USDA works with federally recognized tribes only. CDBG is non-federally recognized only. So you can also use the USDA for planning, which is in advance, like pre-planning, environmental, feasibility, architectural, even legal. You can acquire land. You can use the money up front for purchasing land where you want to build your water tank or your wastewater treatment plant. They have, well, I'm not exactly sure what this side had in terms of the talking points, but the bottom one, refinancing, is very important. Obviously, you can refinance existing debt through USDA. You do have to be able to repay on their loan programs. They do have grant programs. On their loan programs, there is a methodology and financial formula for them to make sure that you can repay. They'll give you a promissory note or assignment of tribal income if it's one of the federally recognized tribes. You do need security for your loans if you're a a unit of government, and they have various ways of making sure that you're going to be able to afford the repayment, either through general obligation bond or pledge of taxes or an assessment, create an assessment district, that sort of thing. This is the security for their nonprofit organizations. When they make a loan to nonprofits, you've got deeds of trusts, the UCC financing. There's going to be security agreements of various types that the nonprofit would have to sign with the USDA. Their application process, they'll help you with that. They'll help you get started. I know that very often, again, CRWA and RCAC are often involved with USDA for a pre-application, full application, and all the way through the funding process. This is the components of their application. You'll need to do preliminary engineering. You'll need to do the NEPA environmental. You've got to have operating budgets, financial, 3 years worth of audits. They are on the federal cycle of October 1st to September 30th. They accept applications all year round, but every October 1st, there's a new program year, new fiscal year for them to be able to provide funds. You can get these contact information straight out of the workbook or off of the website for the various districts and kind of regions of the state. Sacramento, Doug Colucci is for this area here. Again, county by county, they have all of their contact people. So depending on where your project is, you can always get in touch with Dave Hartwell, the first name on this list. He would have been here to give the presentation today, so he can always send you to the right location. And I'm sorry I can't really take a lot of questions on USDA. Did the best we could just flipping through it. But they certainly will always answer any questions that go through the common inquiry form as well. So now, we're going to turn it over to the California iBank. And I'd like to introduce Tad Thomas, again, municipal finance specialist. And he will give you the iBank presentation.
Good morning. Tad Thomas, loan officer with the iBank, California Infrastructure Economic Development Bank. And probably a lot of you are unaware of the iBank. It's a pretty small office. We have about 25 people in the office, so one of your smaller state agencies. Our program manager is Carlos Nakata, which is in the audience today, and I'd like to recognize him because he gets to retire tomorrow, which is great for him, and I wish him all the best. Diane Cummings will be taking over the helm of our program, the iSurf program, and so let's go through a couple of slides here, see what we have for you. Okay. The iBank was created in 1999. It had two fundings from the general fund that initially started the funding to make it available that we're utilizing. Our mission is for financing public infrastructure and private development to promote health and climate for jobs and contribute to this strong economy. This last July, we had the governor's reorganization, which maybe some of you have heard about, and currently we're under GoBiz, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. We have recently had a new director, Tivia Barnes, appointed, and a new deputy director, Ruben Morales, who has come on board. And we have a board of directors, 5 board of directors, which each of our funding projects goes before, and they're approved by that board. So when we see a project looks like we're going to be able to fund it, we do a staff report and bring it to the board, and the board will make the decision on that funding. As I said, we have a smaller staff, about 23, but we do have 2 attorneys, and we're running 2 programs. Let me show you the next slide here. The infrastructure state revolving fund, which is the program that I work for, and then we have the conduit revenue bond financing program. I'll speak real briefly about that program towards the end of the program here. Okay. As I said, it was originally funded, State General's Fund, in 97 and in 2000. In the past, our financing has been below market rate financing for a wide variety of infrastructure projects. The funding that we're using is revolving those loan funds, recycling loan payments, interest earnings, and proceeds from the tax-exempt bonds that we put out. Currently, we have cash available to make approximately $30 to $40 million available to be able to put out on the street. So we do have funding that's available. We have approximately 150 million bond capacity remaining, that once those loans are made and we finance those and attach them with the bond series, those make additional funding available for us to put out on the street. Currently, we have two of the 3 bond series that have already been put out are being refinanced, that is going to make additional funding available for us. I would mention that currently the I-Bank has a criteria that we're following and when administering the program, and the director and board are looking at revising our criteria. So on our website, you can take a look at the criteria on there, and it's going to be changed. We're hoping to open up the program and make it more accessible, and so it's kind of an exciting time for us. Okay, for applicants, eligible applicants are cities, counties, special districts. It's any subdivision of local or state government or special district. So primarily governmental agencies under the ISERF program. In terms of our eligible projects, we've got 16 categories. And I noticed most water and wastewater. Obviously, those are 2 of our 16 categories that we have up on there. So we pretty much, it's easier to say what we cannot do and what's not eligible, and that would include we can't be involved with housing, medical facilities, buildings of general public conduct, and no refinancing. Okay, as the criteria stands right now, that's the slide that you're looking at. We're looking at a loan limit of $250,000 up to $10 million. That's one of the areas we're looking at possibly opening up, and that criteria might change. So that would be something that you can look for as a change that might be coming out. Our term is 30 years up to the useful life. That's pretty standard underwriting criteria that I don't imagine that will change. Interest rates change monthly. And the interest rate is set at the time we take your project to the board and it is voted on. So that would be the interest rate that would become effective. Currently, our 20-year interest rate is 2.68. Our 30-year is 3.23. That's of this month. It'll change next month. Luckily, they're still down and continuing to stay low. They were up last month, but there's still a good opportunity. The fees, one-time origination fee, 85 basis points, or 10,000, whichever is greater. Again, this is the existing criteria that we're looking at. Okay. So in terms of we're not a grant program. We are financing, and so we're looking for your ability to make repayment to us. We're looking for an eligible repayment stream of funding, of source of funds. When the program had originally developed, the iBank had met with rating agencies and had developed the underwriting criteria, and so some of these may look familiar in terms of other programs too. In terms of our two primary sources of repayment are an enterprise fund that the special districts use, or a general fund, a source of funding for cities. The enterprise fund, we're looking at a net systems revenue pledge with sufficient revenue after expenses that you have monies remaining that can afford payments to the financing. The criteria has, under a general fund, we have a lease-back agreement securing an essential asset, and we include covenants for annual payments to be made by the general fund. We do require rental insurance with that, and total annual debt service may not exceed 15% of all general fund debt service that they're paying. We can look at assessment districts. We haven't done that many, but we have done one. So we can take a look at those if you're looking at trying to finance something through an assessment district. Projects must be tax exempt, no private activity or private gain, and the project must promote economic development. It must attract, create, or sustain long-term employment opportunities. And I'll show you a couple examples of how we made that work for a few of our projects. I'm going to skip the next slide. Let me see. I'm going the wrong way now. Oop. Uh-oh. Now I blew it. Can you just go ahead and advance me? Next one. Next one. Okay. All right. So another area that we're changing is that we used to have a two-step application process. We're going back to just having a one application process, which we're encouraging, if you've got a project, to come speak with us and meet with us, have a pre-application meeting with us. But we're going to go down to a one application process. It's going to be on our website and it can be downloaded and filled out. What we need for the project is a short description of the project. We need 3 years audited financials so we can take a look at the cash flow of the project. Copies of existing debt documents. We want to make sure that if we're going to be on parity or with other financing, that the terms of our agreements will work with those agreements. So we need the debt documents. We need your timeline, an explanation of how we'll promote economic development. The selling point of our program is that there's no federal overlays, there's no design and build requirements, and there's no matching requirements. So those are some advantages to our program. I'll see if this can work again. Yeah, sorry. So here's an example of most of our projects, 45% of the city, 25% special districts, redevelopment agencies no longer or we're financing their projects. And that's just representative of the type of agencies that come in for borrowing from us. Kind of representative of the hands that were raised in the room, which was predominantly wastewater projects, have been our bread and butter, most of the projects that we've been dealing with. So water treatment, sewage treatment, but we do streets and highways. Again, the 16 categories, you can take a look at those and see if those would meet your needs, one of the categories. The next slide is our interest rates. Again, sort of a historic low for our program. We're at 2.68 on the 20-year and 3.22 on the 30-year. Here's an example of one of our projects. If some of you come in past Davis, you'll notice that there's a water tank over there. This was for a water pump and storage tank. What the City of Davis had done, it recognized that its planned growth management element satisfied only 1/10 of the city's need for retail. And so many of the residents of Davis were having to come into Sacramento, of which then the City of Davis lost that tax revenue with all the residents coming into the city to acquire merchandise. It also meant that it negatively impacted the air quality, everyone being on the road, and also the economy, the local economy. So land was rezoned to create a 2nd Street crossing retail outlet. And this is where the job connection came into. They weren't able to move forward with that development unless they had identified additional water to accommodate that new construction. So we had a pump station and storage tank that permitted a Target store and other retailers to locate at that. You'll actually see it. It's right across the other side of the road from the water tank. Approximately 170 to 235 jobs were created with that project. Next slide. This was another project, I believe it's County of Kern, curb and gutter drainage improvements. Once again, the development in this area didn't have any street and gutter at that time. It was a rural area, so it was more open roads without any way of conveying water out of the area. So they identified 3 areas that were going to be used for improving to the development standards that had come into place since their time. The streets were prematurely deteriorating due to poor quality drainage and ponding. Community groups and church members organized and donated their labor to do the sidewalks instead of pathways, but then the I-Bank came in and did the curb and gutters, and eventually the streets were done, improving that whole area and allowing retail interest to come in and serve that area. So it was sort of upgrading the entire neighborhood. Let me go to the next one. The third project, North Tahoe Fire Protection District. This one was kind of an interesting because I knew the old former firehouse, and this was Station 51. It was constructed in 1961. I believe it was just a two-door. It was basically it had operation constraints, didn't have enough room. The larger station allowed the district to acquire an aerial ladder, which and larger vehicles for the facility. Well, there were 4 developments within the community that wanted to raise the height of their hotels to accommodate the new development, and all were placed on hold until actually the development and the fire truck was purchased, and it allowed for the larger size vehicles that removed the height limitation on how large the size buildings could be built. The station also allowed 6 additional fire personnel to be hired. So once again, employment opportunities were facilitated through that project. Now I'll just briefly mention that we also have another component. I don't know that manager from that program is here, but it's the Conduit Revenant Bond Program. The I-Bank can provide assistance for low-cost tax-exempt bond financing for industrial development bonds and 501(c)(3) bonds. We have the authority to issue tax-exempt bonds, but we do not pledge our own revenues for the bonds. We simply facilitate the designation as those bonds being tax-exempt. So if you look like you're going to be putting some bonds together, the I-Bank can facilitate that process for you. A couple examples of ones that we've done in the past. IDB projects. Some of the names you're probably familiar with: Goodwill and Boone Farm Winery. Go ahead and hit the next slide. And this is the contact information if you've got some questions for us or we can help you. Our Deputy Assistant Deputy Director Ruben Rojas can be reached at, I want to give you the telephone number. You can reach him directly, 916-327-2029. And he's facilitating new projects coming in, and I've got some business cards for him also, and be happy to meet with you after all the presentations. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tad. One thing that I did forget to mention, you got two other slips of paper in your booklet. One is the agenda. We're going to be ahead of schedule where it says morning break at 10:15. We're going to be ahead of that schedule. But the purple page is our evaluation page. So at the end of the day, if you can fill those out and leave it for us, we all appreciate the information and suggestions, comments that you all make in terms of trying to improve our program, improve the funding fares. So now it's time for my presentation on the CDBG program, Community Development Block Grant from the Department of Housing and Community Development. All right, so that's going to pop up on the screen. So before we get into some of the other slides, just to sort of tell you there's four main points to start with. The CDBG program is sometimes used as a front end of your project. We can be upfront money in terms of planning, environmental, feasibility, that kind of thing, a study being done on how to best implement the project itself or to acquire the land. So it's kind of upfront. Number two, we make grants, not loans. So this is money granted, but point number three, it only goes to cities and counties. That's the way HUD National CDBG program is designed. Ours is the state program, and we'll get more about eligible applicants in a moment. And the last thing is we have this wonderful concept in the CDBG program called program income, which is a revolving fund. So if you hear that word revolving today, you'll know that that means that there's funding that is available repeatedly. It doesn't necessarily dry out. Even if there's no bonds issued, you have a chance of coming back because the funding will be available again. And what we do is we put this on the local level so that we can fund a city or a county. They can loan it out for a project or for a program. When they get repaid, they keep it and can loan it again or grant it. Well, once they grant it, it's a grant. But if they lend it, it comes back. And it's reusable funding that stays on the local level. It's the grant that keeps on giving. So the CDBG program, is this thing working? Okay. It was developed in basically 1974 as amended, as we say, through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We can only work with units of local general government. We do not fund directly to water districts, nonprofits, special districts. However, there's a very well-established path to get to nonprofits or other, what we call subrecipients. It can be a contractor or a subrecipient, but basically the money can go downline to your level as a water district, even if you're not here representing a city or a county. There is a difference between what we call the entitlement program, which is for those cities and counties, cities above the population of 50,000 or counties 200,000 and over. If you're under those limits, you go through the state CDBG program. If you're above those limits, you are entitled to go straight to HUD and get an annual allocation. It's a population formula. They give it to you every year. If it's ours, it's a competitive application process. So that's the difference between entitlement and non-entitlement. We've got basically 8 main categories of eligible activities. Housing rehab is actually the program where you would fund laterals. water in or sewer out of an individual house. But if you're going to be doing a pipe down the middle of the road, that's a public improvement. So you can do both through our program. It just comes out of a different kind of set of criteria and requirements on how you implement the project or the program. We can also fund all these other activities. The only way we can do, so housing acquisition, we're not here about that today. Housing new construction, we cannot spend money for the new homes, the new apartment complex. But for water and sewer, we have a program, a niche called Public Improvements in Support of Housing New Construction. You can fund the utilities, the road, the curbs, gutters, sidewalk, right up to the lot line. What's on the lot where the housing gets built, we can't fund anything on that. We can't touch it. But there's a lot of other programs like the Home program or Cal Home where you can get in tax credit programs. We can do all the infrastructure that leads to it. Public improvements, that's your basic water, sewer, and roads. Community facilities, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Public services. Now, under economic development, aside from loans to businesses to create jobs, we can also do the infrastructure that leads to and supports a business. But on those projects, that extra layer of requirement is that jobs are created. Talk more about that later. And again, number 8 is our planning, which is sort of that upfront money. So one of the things about CDBG is that it has to meet what we call a national objective. In other words, this program is designed for low-income communities and low-income individuals. There are some very strict, this is the line, not a dollar more in terms of income qualification, that sort of thing. So there's 3 ways of meeting the national objective. If you don't meet the national objective, you give us back the money. So we always want to make sure that in terms of eligible activities, you're making sure that your project is in a neighborhood that qualifies so that it's eligible and you get the money. You don't have to give it back. Our annual cycle is that every January we are releasing, we call it the Super NOFA because we used to have a separate notice of funding availability on NOFA. We used to have a separate one for economic development, community development, planning, the Native American set aside, the Colonia set aside. We combined all of those into one Super NOFA, one super contract. You'll deal with a super representative. I have a super staff. So that's what we combined, and that's why it's the very kicker on the very bottom where it says those are all competitive except the over-the-counter, the OTC. The third bullet down, economic development, OTC is the large projects, which very often is where your infrastructure in support of a big business. We'll have a picture example in just a minute. Okay, so like I said, the grants are to the cities and counties. This year we were supposed to give out $29 million. Unfortunately, we didn't give out $29 million. We gave out $50.5 million. So, as much as everybody is saying there's no money available, there was this year. Okay, so they were right. Next year, we're not going to give out 50. We'll probably be more towards 25. Funding is going down from HUD and a number of federal programs. A lot of the bond programs are drying up as well. So it is a competitive program, but we always set aside 1.25% for the Native American allocation and approximately 5% also for the colonias, which are within 150 miles of the Mexican border. This year we had no applicants for the Native American, and I think we gave 1 award on colonias. Traditionally, we have been, a lot of our funding went to housing rehab because one of the statutes on the state level is 51% of our funding has to be awarded to either housing or housing related. Infrastructure counts as housing related. Over the last couple of years, we've moved more towards community development because there's the home program through HCD as well. And that's exactly, why should we do what they do? They've got the same HUD funding source. So this year, 46% of our $50 million went towards infrastructure projects. So we are doing our best to help on California's infrastructure needs. Okay. Here's a picture which was that category I just mentioned, infrastructure in support of housing new construction between the home and CDBG and tax credits. We funded $850,000 of off-site improvements. This was like a $20 million or $21 million project of a 72-unit building. So if your community is developing housing, but you don't have this, but as a condition of approval, your zoning commission says, if you don't bring utilities to this lot, we're not going to let you build 70 units because you don't have water for them. We can fund that water right up to the lot line, but that's where our funding stops, and the other funding will build the actual building. So that's that first bullet again kind of says that 51%, but that's kind of a magic number in CDBG. It shows up a lot. To prove that you are a low-income individual, you have to be at 80% of the area median income, 80% or under. To prove that your entire community is a low-income community and eligible for an infrastructure project to be built there, 51% of the population in that community has to be low income, 80% or under. More often than not, it's done through census tract block group data from HUD or an income survey. If your service area is smaller or larger than the actual census tracts and block groups, you're going to need to do an income survey to prove that your specific area or neighborhood is eligible. Okay. Here's an example of a water line in Placer County. Looks like a standard construction site. That's the sort of thing that we fund. Here's a community health care. This is under our public facilities. For public facilities, we can do multi-use kind of community centers or single-use library, medical, dental, health care, child care, seniors, youth center, all of those kind of public facilities. This one was a USDA and CDBG co-funded project up in Northern California. Under the economic development, you do need to create jobs. For every 35, typically the formula is every $35,000 that the jurisdiction is going to grant to a business, they have to create one job. And 51% of all the jobs they create, or more, must be to low-income individuals who are self-certified as to what their income is at the time they're hired. So through this program, you can do a straight business loan and they can buy inventory or do marketing, but if they expand their facility or build infrastructure to allow for a building expansion, that's where your infrastructure project comes in under our economic development. We also have a microenterprise program. Not a lot of infrastructure is going to happen through that, but it's loans and grants to low-income individuals who have a business of 5 individuals or less. So the large projects, the OTCs, they can go up to $6 million, $3 million per year, and you can earmark 2 years in a row on an award. So these large infrastructure projects will go through there. We do have an internal loan committee that approves these, so they do have to make sense financially because there is repayment. When we give the grant to the city or county, they're going to make a loan, but we already know that it's a loan program, so there is an underwriting process to that. Here's a picture of, again, co-funded between the iBank and CDBG. The roadway on the photo on the right was in support of a large shopping center. A number of businesses all moved into the shopping center, and a lot of jobs were created through those multiple businesses, and that's how the dollar amount was contingent on how many jobs were going to be built. Okay? On our eligible studies, again, for the upfront money, feasibility, that second one that says prepare a funding application, strike that. That'll be out of next year's book because that's HUD came down and said, nope, that's not eligible. We sometimes get questions about eligibility, and we turn to HUD and say, look, this is your program that we're implementing. Can we get a little bit of guidance from one of your specialists? And one of them said, nope, that's not an eligible use of funds, so that's going to change. But to do your environmental review, preliminary engineering, an infrastructure study for your business, We can give up to $100,000 in this year's NOFA, and the same for the 2014 that's being released in January. So $100,000 study as your feasibility study to include preliminary drawings on a project. So that's available. In regards to program income, once the money was granted a couple of years ago, and they made a couple housing loans or business loans, when the city of Rio Dell got repaid, they turned around and took $100,000 and put it into this infrastructure project. So that's where the program income revolving loan account, as we call it, sometimes you'll hear revolving loan fund, RLF, RLA, that kind of thing. The RLAs that our jurisdictions are allowed to create and encouraged to create can then be used for any eligible CDBG program. There's different methods of implementing it and funding these projects, but this is an example of what they did. USDA and Department of Public Health also had funding in on, much larger funding on this example. Now, we do give a grant, but there are strings attached. This slide is the strings. These are the requirements that if you do it wrong, you give back the money. So this is important. You have to do NEPA. You're going to do CEQA, but that you're going to do on your own or at the jurisdictional level. We're going to review the NEPA for your environmental review. You must do prevailing wage and comply with Davis-Bacon and related acts. And we know it increases the costs, but if we're in the project, regardless of the other funding sources, you have to do the whole project as prevailing wage. So keep that in mind when you're doing your engineering and your cost estimates. Federal relocation guidelines. If you have to purchase or through eminent domain widen the street and take away some project and you end up displacing someone, you have to pay federal displacement and federal relocation assistance to the family or business that's being displaced. Those are the kind of federal overlays that apply to all federal programs, and it's very important through CDBG. You have to do federal procurement, Title 24, CFR, Section 85.36, got to be followed. Equal opportunity, citizen participation, a lot of these that apply to all other federal funding sources are very strictly enforced through ours because we're giving you millions of dollars. So we have our grant management manual on our website. It's being updated chapter by chapter over the years. Any questions, you can always contact us. And this is how you contact us. If you have questions today and you're talking about an entitlement jurisdiction, I can give you a little information on generalized information about the CDBG program, but I can't tell you how the city of Sacramento is going to implement it because our program has no jurisdiction over any of the entitlement programs. So I can help in the breakout session, possibly, but I don't want to give you definitive answers because a jurisdiction that's an entitlement may have their own local policies that I'm not aware of. So get in touch with us. We do have a listserv. The second bullet there that says, at the end you can see it says subscriber. You can subscribe to any and all of the programs through the Department of Housing and Community Development, and always stay in touch. So that's one more slide that also just says, remember that this coming January, our 2014 NOFA is going to be released, and we can chat with you after during the breakout sessions about individual questions. So that's it for the CDBG program presentation. So right now I'm going to give two little intros to our guest organizations, RCAC and CRWA, Rural Communities Assistance Corporation and California Rural Water Association, and then we're going to take our mid-morning break, okay? So, RCAC, they'll have a table afterwards. They provide assistance to small municipal and nonprofit water systems, wastewater systems, and solid waste management programs in 15 western states. We don't care about any except California, right? They can provide training and technical assistance, and their services are directed to low-income communities, nonprofit organizations, and these small water and wastewater systems to help you build, improve, manage, operate, or finance drinking water, wastewater, and solid waste. They, in most cases, will offer this assistance at no charge because they have state contracts with some of these agencies. And they're very nice people, so they'll do it free, basically, is what I'm saying. Now, depending on your situation and theirs, that's up to them. That's one of those things that you should contact them directly. They do have a funding program that gives interim or gap, or what you'd call a bridge loan, so that while you're waiting for the funding on a grant that you've already received, that's supposed to come on an annual basis, and you need something to fill the gap, at that time they can give you bridge loans through their own revolving fund. So that's RCAC, and they've been very helpful to CFCC over the years. So has California Rural Water Association. They provide training and technical assistance programs. They are a C6 nonprofit organization, and they provide training and resources to rural communities through formal classroom training, through hands-on training out in the field, and they have what they call their Academy of Water Education, which provides professional continuing education units. So for a lot of program operators at some of these water and wastewater treatment plants, the operators have to be certified, and they provide some training so that those continuing education units can be used to certify your personnel. They also can assist in plant operations, troubleshooting, regulatory compliance, rate studies, that sort of system, that sort of thing. And for drinking water through the State Department of Public Health, they provide assistance for their SRF program. They have also low-interest interim loans that are up to $100,000 for things like engineering, environmental reports, and interim financing needs of various natures, you know, how projects go. So they will also have tables or be able to chat with you about if you have interim financing needs or just assistance kind of capacity building. If you have a staff of 3 and a project of $28 million, you could probably use somebody to help you fill out applications, regulatory compliance documentation, that sort of thing. So we're going to take our mid-morning break now. It is 10 minutes to 10 on that clock and 12 minutes to 10 on that clock. So we're going to take a 15-minute break and be back at 10 o'clock sharp. For the folks in the room, if you would be so kind, please, as to be back sharply at 10, because we do have the folks on the webinar, and we want to be back in touch with them starting exactly at 10. So thank you very much. We'll take our break, and we'll be back with more presentations from new agencies. Thank you very much. All right, so are we on here? No. You got to turn the other side because I hit that. That's on. That's on. But it's. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to round two, another funding round. One of the things I usually say at the beginning of the day when people are getting in here and sometimes haven't had enough coffee, is that while this may be some rather kind of dry numbers and dry information, you know, this percent and this percent and this project, that project, we're talking about millions of dollars. So hopefully that'll keep your interest. Okay, so with more information now on funding sources through the State Water Resources Control Board, Megan Tosney, who's a manager in the Department of Financial Assistance and an engineer here, will be giving the presentation for State Water Resources Control Board. If you're on the webcast, remember that you can send in a chat question through the email, coastalroom at coastalrm at calepa.ca.gov. And now Megan Tosney.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to clarify if the agenda says Bridget Chase is going to do the presentation today. I'm subbing for her. She's sick. So we both work in the Division of Financial Assistance, and our mission is to fund projects that preserve, enhance, and restore California's water resources. So today's presentation is going to focus primarily on the Clean Water State Revolving Fund program. I'll also briefly touch on the water recycling funding program and our small community wastewater program. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll also mention some of the other grant programs we have available just to make sure you're aware of them and let you know where to get more information about those. So the CWSRF program is primarily a low-interest financing program. We fund a variety of water quality projects. The majority of the projects that we fund are wastewater and water recycling projects. We do also have a second branch of our program that we call expanded use, where we can fund non-point source type projects. And just to give you an idea of the size of the program, since inception in 1989, we've funded over 600 projects for $6.5 billion. So we do have a lot of loan funding available. One thing I wanted to clarify also is that our the state's drinking water state revolving fund program is administered through the California Department of Public Health. So if you're looking for drinking water funding, that's the place to go, and there'll be a presentation by that agency in a few minutes here. So for wastewater and water recycling, it's pretty broad what we can fund. We will do, we fund only publicly owned facilities. That's the first thing. But we'll do wastewater treatment. It can be new treatment facilities, expansion of existing, or upgrades of existing. Local sewers, we can do rehabilitation or replacement of pipes and pump stations and all of that sort of thing. We'll do sewer interceptors, and we also do water reclamation facilities. And then under the other branch of our program that we call expanded use, we do non-point source projects that are identified in the non-point source plan. We also can do estuary projects and some stormwater facilities as well. Our interest rate is based on what the most recent general obligation bond sale rate was, so we are at half of that GO bond rate. In the last 5 years or so, it's ranged between typically 2 to 3%. Right now, it's at a low of 1.9%, so our rates are very good right now. We typically finance over 20 years, but we do have the option to extend to 30 years for some small disadvantaged communities and also for regionalization projects. And then repayment starts 1 year after completion of construction. Okay, so this slide has a lot of numbers on it, but I basically just wanted to touch on the fact that we do have principal forgiveness and grant money available through the program. It is relatively limited. We specify every year in our intended use plan what categories of projects we're going to target those funds toward. So you'll see here mention of Category 1 and Category 2. So Category 1 is where the bulk of our principal forgiveness and grant money goes. It's specifically for small disadvantaged communities with high wastewater rates. So we define that as less than 20,000 people, a median household income that's less than 80% of the statewide median household income, and wastewater rates that are more than 1.5% of the community's median household income. And then category 2 is much more broad. We can fund small communities that have lower rates. We can fund larger disadvantaged communities, and we can also fund even projects that target a disadvantaged area of a more affluent community. And so those funds tend to go much more quickly just because there's a lot more people that are eligible for those. You can see the trend if you look at the bottom row here where it says total. We had about almost $74 million in fiscal year 2010. And it's declined down to less than 15 million this past year. So it's very competitive to get those funds. We usually try to pair the grant money with loan money to make an affordable package and kind of spread the grant money around as much as we can to as many projects. So that's all I'm going to say about that. As far as our application process, we accept them on a continuous basis. We don't have a certain solicitation period. You can submit at any time during the year. And we commit the funds in readiness to proceed order. So what that means is once you have a complete application submitted to us and approved, that's when we'll commit funds to the project. And we just released a new application package in June of 2013. It's up on our website now. There are 4 packages that make up the application. So you'll submit a general package, technical, environmental, and also a financial security package, and that will make up your complete application once you have all 4 of those completed. There's also a package of instructions that goes into detail about what you need to provide with each of those packages. There's various attachments that go with each of them, and so like I said, all of that is up on our website now. We do use that same application package for both the wastewater side of our program and the expanded use side. So that is the package to use no matter what type of project you're applying for. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that we, just in the last week or so, have released the application on our FAST system. It's the Financial Assistance Application Submittal Tool. It's a website where folks can log in, and it's basically just a portal for you to go and upload electronic versions of all your application materials. And so we're encouraging folks to start using that as you're comfortable with it. We're not strictly requiring it. If you would prefer to submit via email or hard copy, we're still accepting applications in those forms as well. And just to give you a really rough overview of the funding process, basically once your application is complete and approved, we'll execute what we call an initial financing agreement. At that point, you can start receiving reimbursement for planning and design costs. Then after the bids come in, you'll submit a final bid package to us, and we'll amend the agreement to reflect all the final costs. And then at that point, you can start getting reimbursed for construction costs. And Bob Pontrieri is the contact, the general contact for the CWSRF program, so his contact info is here. And the next program I'm going to touch on briefly is the water recycling funding program. The program is focused on promoting the use of treated wastewater to either offset or augment state and local water supply. So we will fund recycled water treatment and distribution and also recharge facilities under this program. Like the SRF, it's primarily geared toward funding publicly owned facilities, but we can also do privately owned utilities that are regulated by the PUC under this program. And like the SRF, applications are accepted on a continuous basis. It's actually the same application package as we use for the SRF program. There's just a few additional attachments that apply if it is a water recycling project. One thing that is very popular in the water recycling arena is our planning grants. We can offer up to 50% of eligible planning costs to a maximum of $75,000. As far as construction goes, primarily most projects are funded with loan money, but there is a very limited amount of grant money available to supplement in some cases. The special additional requirements that I mentioned earlier that relate to water recycling, there's going to be specific minimum use requirements as far as the actual recycled water that's delivered as a result of the project. And sort of related to that, we're going to look for either a mandatory use ordinance or specific agreements with the end users to ensure that the recycled water will be used. And then for 5 years after the project's complete, you would have to report on the actual recycled water deliveries. And the main contact person for that program is Dan Newton. His contact info is here if you want to learn more about that program. He's a great resource. And then the last program I'm going to touch on real quickly is the Small Community Wastewater Program. We have a unit within the SRF program that's focused specifically on small disadvantaged community wastewater projects. So we've been implementing changes over the last 5 years or so to try to make the program more affordable and useful for small communities. And so I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we're doing now. We always ensure that we process disbursements within 30 days. We also have the ability to refinance existing debts. This is wastewater debts, if it's necessary to make the new project affordable. We also, in some cases, can provide, like I said, extended terms and even reduced interest rates. And we use those sort of in conjunction with the principal forgiveness and grant money that I already mentioned earlier. We are now also offering planning financing. And specifically for projects that qualify under Category 1, we can give up to $500,000 as a 100% grant to help with feasibility studies, environmental rate studies, those sorts of things to help get a community set up to apply for construction. And then finally, we have a technical assistance contract that is specifically geared towards serving small disadvantaged communities with wastewater-related technical assistance. And it's pretty broad what we can provide under that contract. So if any of you are working with a community that you think could, utilize their services, we are contracting currently with California Rural Water Association. I would say to get in touch with me, and my contact info is here on this slide, and we can talk to you more about whether we can provide some assistance under that contract. And then finally, I'm just going to go briefly touch on some of these other grant programs that we have available so that you're aware of them. We have a 319H non-point source grant program that's federally funded. Under Proposition 84, we do have funding for clean beaches and also for stormwater projects. And we have a flyer in the back that has a bunch of additional details about what's going on with the stormwater grant program. They actually have a solicitation open right now. I think it closes on Thursday, so it's very close to the end date, but if you want some more details about that, you can pick up a flyer. We also have the Underground Storage Tank Cleanup Fund, and we'll have a few folks here from the Brownfields program in the afternoon. If anyone is interested in learning more about that, you can come to our table and get some information. And I also wanted to mention that at our table this afternoon, we're going to have a few staff people with a laptop set up. So the FAST program that I mentioned, which is the portal to submit electronic applications to the CWSRF program, we'll have that set up so that you can sort of see what this program looks like, get set up for a user account and all of that if you're interested in that. And so that's it as far as programs. The very last slide here is just our LIRIS email list. I would definitely recommend that you go to this page. You just have to put in your name and your email address, and then you can check which of all the funding programs we've gone through today that you're interested in, and you'll learn if there are documents available for public comment, if we're about to open a solicitation. You'll stay apprised of all that sort of information. So it's a great resource. And that is all.
All right. Thank you, Megan. All righty. So next up, just like Megan said, if you want projects for drinking water, go to California Department of Public Health. So right now, George Fagella will be giving the presentation. He's a staff environmental scientist for the Capacity Development Program, and he's joined by Pete Stamos, Regional Funding Coordinator, who also has a couple of some program information to give you. So, George?
Good morning, everyone. This is our last fair of the tour. So my voice is a little croaky because I rocked it out there, man. So anyway, that and a little laryngitis. The first one sounds a little better, though. So I better get started. Again, I'm with Department of Public Health. I'm going to talk primarily about our SRF funding, which is the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. We have two other programs that are currently winding down, but the chances of getting into those are pretty much nil at this point, so there's really no point in talking about it other than a historical perspective, which I'm going to skip on today. The purpose of our program is to provide funding to eligible systems to bring them into compliance with safe drinking water standards. Now, that is really important, and that's why I did a little pause and tried to enunciate it and tried to focus on that, because that is a major restriction in our program at this time. Is you have to have a problem. You have to be in violation of something. We are funding a little bit down past that for water meters, but I'll talk about that later. But the major portion of our funding goes to rectify a problem that you have with drinking water standards. The priority is a risk-based system. So the higher the public risk, the higher the priority standing you get. Now, the one program I'm going to talk about in Prop 84, and it's the only one I'm going to be talking about, well, it's split into two segments, is the emergency funding. That is still in effect. We have emergency money available for two categories. One is for true emergencies, such as earthquakes, fires, your well collapses, and you don't have water. Now, we are lenient in that one. For instance, we have funded water systems that have not kept up on their maintenance, and then they run into problems with their well, and their well either collapses, their motor goes out, their pump goes out. We will do that because we are Department of Public Health, but the intent of the funding is for true emergencies. The other part of the emergency funding program is interim water. So we have a small funding program that if you're in the process of getting a project completed and you want drinking water to carry you through the process, we have funding available for that. Whether or not it's going to last that time period that it takes to get you through depends on the size of the water system and a lot of other factors. It probably will not carry you all the way through that time period, but it does give you some interim drinking water. All right, again, the intent is to bring the water systems into compliance. The US EPA provides most of our money. Part of it is state match, and it is a revolving fund program. We are allowed to give up to 30% of EPA's contribution to the grant each year to give out to water systems as grants. Now, when I said EPA grant, we get money from EPA in a grant, cap grant. We can give part of that money out as a grant, 30% of it. But primarily, again, we are a revolving fund program. You have to be a legal entity. You have to be in good standing with the Secretary of State. And this is really important for mutuals and some of the nonprofit corporations that own water systems, because we do run into a lot of problems with legal status of the entity, whether they are a legal entity. We've run across some old systems that thought they were legal entities, started through the process, but never completed it, and have been going on for 20 years or so, acting like a mutual, but really, in fact, we're not. So when we run into those, that's what slows the process down. So if you're thinking about or you're looking at getting into the program, now's the time to start looking at all of your paperwork to make sure that you have everything in order, your entity status, your ownership, your water rights, all of those things do slow the process down and have slowed the process down on a number of our projects, quite a number of our projects. So this is just basically an example of our ranking. So you can see A, why it's ranked A, and why we would deal with that first. So with an acute outbreak, bacteriological, that would get it first. Now you look down at the bottom is H. We are currently funding down to H, which includes water meters. And we can also get a little bit of infrastructure funding in there if your project is described properly in the pre-application. So if you're having water outages, pressure drops, leaks in your lines, if you document that, we can fund that. If you fill out the form and the pre-application, you say, you know what, our lines are 50 years old, we want to be a good proactive water system, and we would like to replace those lines with SRF funding, you described it wrong for us. It has to be in relation to public health risk. Okay, some numbers. Our grants are available to water systems that are either disadvantaged or severely disadvantaged. You are eligible for the grants. You may not get them depending on what your current water rates are. Your water rates have to be a minimum of 1.5% of your median household income of your service area. All of our incomes are not community incomes, they're based on your service area. Our interest rates, pretty darn low. 1.79 roughly. Disadvantaged community, again, is 80% of the state median household income. Severely disadvantaged is at or less than 60%. So you can see that a disadvantaged community is roughly 47,000. Severely disadvantaged community is roughly 35,000. We do have contracts with RCAC to provide median household income surveys at our discretion. So we do about 15, maybe we're hoping to get up to 20 or so, but currently running around 10 to 15. So going through our process, if there is a disagreement, once we reach that point in the financial analysis of the where the median household income comes into play, because we do it based on service area, a lot of times the sources that we get median household incomes for are based on either census tract or larger areas, and not all the time are they very descriptive of a smaller area within that larger area. So we have the option to have a median household income. what can be very beneficial to a lot of folks. Here's just an example of what your water rates would be expected to be for various incomes. We have two types of funding currently. We have planning and we have construction. Planning is a maximum of $500,000 per project, and it's a 5-year loan. As an incentive, if you move at the end of your planning project to a construction application within 120 days, your planning loan can take on the terms of the construction loan. It is not folded into the construction loan. It remains a separate loan, but it moves to a 20-year payback rather than a 5-year term. Construction loans, 20 years, $20 million maximum per project per year, and $30 million maximum per entity per year. This is just a little slide to give you a rough idea of parts of the financial review. Let's see. Oh, there it is right there. Okay, since I'm in capacity development, of course, I think capacity development is the most important thing of a water system. So you'll look down toward the bottom, and water systems that get funding are required by EPA to have TMF, which is technical, managerial, and financial capacity. So that is basically a program to hopefully ensure that your water system remains sustainable. So going through the process of the application, part of that is a TMF assessment that will be done, can be done by either the water systems. We have help available to do that for the smaller water systems. So in looking at it, it's a complicated process, the application process is, so in looking at it, if you're concerned about the complexity and whether or not you can deal with that, let us know, because help is there and it costs nothing. So we have free help for everyone that are within a certain size, under 10,000. Most of our TMF work right now is in helping water systems get through the funding program. We do have technical, but basically technical, managerial, and financial help, not financial help, but financial management help available to help you get on the right track and hopefully stay on the right track throughout at least the duration of the funding 20-year life and beyond, we're hoping. How you get into the program is a universal pre-app. It happens in the spring generally, and we don't have a date right now, so you'll just have to keep an eye on that. It's very simple. It's online, but again, I alluded to a little bit earlier, the important thing is in that process is the description of your project. Some projects are really no-brainers, and some of them take a little bit of finessing to understand how to describe your project. So if you need help with that, we have help available for that also. And remember, it always has to relate to a health risk. This is my contact, or not mine, it is actually how you can get to me. It's our general line and our general email. So if you want to get in touch with anyone in the funding program, this is the contact to get to everyone. Some useful websites. And I'm going to turn it over to Pete because this is a new program that we're starting. So here's an example of people who came last year, didn't get this presentation because it was not in existence. There are a couple other programs that we had that were not in existence. We do have a program to encourage consolidation. That was not in existence last year either. So here's Pete, and come back next year.
So my name is Pete Stamis. I'm the Northern California Regional Funding Coordinator. What that means is I help water systems, and I'm kind of the go-between between our field office and headquarters. So I deal with a lot of our funding projects in Northern California. And today I'm here presenting the Pre-Planning and Legal Entity Formation Assistance Program, or pre-planning for short, or as will be called next year, Legal Entity Formation Assistance Program. But essentially, the program was created. Oh, is it this one?
On the left, yeah, the left mouse, no, down on the mouse.
Thank you. So what we found in our regular SRF program is that there are communities that are not eligible for our SRF program but wish to apply. Just as an example, there may be a group of homeowners or businesses that wish to apply for funding, but because there is no entity that we can contract with, there's no pathway to funding, so they can't form that community water system that they wish to develop. So what this funding would do is provide assistance in that it could form that entity, which could then turn around and apply for SRF funding. So it creates the eligible entity to apply. Another example is a group of homeowners that are nearby a community or a public water system that wish to have the public water system extend its service area and serve those homeowners. So this is a pilot program this first year, but currently the maximum is $250,000 per project. And we have a total of 1.7 available in this first round. And we do anticipate that it will be in our next year's budget. So again, it's eligible communities include homes, businesses, schools that wish to form a community water system but do not have that entity. And as George mentioned earlier, they do have to have a public health problem, so they still need to fit in our regular SRF categories once they do come back to obtain SRF funding. Or existing public water systems who wish to, I don't have my glasses, to form an eligible entity where there isn't one. Eligible applicants, the question we get often is, well, if we can't contract with them, who do we contract with? This is a group or a list of eligible applicants that we could contract with. It includes towns, cities, JPAs, public colleges, universities, and nonprofit organizations such as CRWA or RCAC. And they would apply on behalf of the community to do this work and obtain the funding to complete it. So typical project components can include public outreach to the community to obtain acknowledgments or obtain a desire to form that eligible entity, identification of the participants in that project, the actual formation of the entity, the costs associated with LAFCO, legal fees, and some minimal engineering and surveying work that's needed to do that formation. And how to apply, there's the website there on the screen. They are due November 8th in this first round, which is here coming very quickly. But again, we do anticipate that another round will be available next year. So that's all I have.
Okay. So now the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, I'm going to flip through their PowerPoint before we get to the Department of Water Resources. There we go. Okay, Bureau of Reclamation. I'm going to read, they sent me their PowerPoint notes, and I got to read this to you because I've always been fascinated by this. The U.S., so the next slide up shows their mission statement. And while you're reading that, the information that they always say is, it's the nation's largest wholesale water supplier, operating 348 reservoirs with a total storage capacity of 245 million acre-feet. And as most of you know, if you're an engineer or something, 1 acre-foot is 325,850 gallons of water, enough to supply a family of 4 for 1 full year. They provide 1 out of 5 Western farmers with irrigation for 10 million acres of farmland, which produces 60% of the nation's vegetables and a quarter of the fresh fruits and nuts. And here's the good one. They are the second largest producer of hydropower in the U.S. They operate 58 hydroelectric power plants that produces 40 billion kilowatt hours of electricity in the last 10 years, which will keep the lights on at my house. I don't know about yours. So you think Bureau of Reclamation, I never thought, running hydroelectric power plants. That was news to me. All right, so their mission is, as you see, to optimize all the beneficial uses, educate people, and they cooperate with other agencies. They have, this is their mission statement sort of thing about conservation partnerships with financial assistance. The next slide will say, this is now, part of their funding is they always talk about these 3 main programs. The Bay Delta Restoration Water Use and Efficiency Grants, their Water Smart Grants, and Title 16, which is, that's always an enigma to me. Okay. And to some of you it seems. It's like, why don't they give it a name where we can understand what it's about? Title 16. It's like Title something else, or, okay. But that's how they do it, and it's actually a really good program. We'll get to that. That's the last of the 3 that I'll just chat about. So their public law, this again seems like code, 111-11. It's the Secure Water Act, so they can fund 50%. So there's a 50-50 match requirement on this particular program, and not to exceed $5 million, but they are available to states, to tribes, irrigation water districts, and any other entity with water or power delivery authority. So if that's you, you'll know we're talking to you. If it's not, go get yourself some authority, and then we're talking to you. Okay? The really interesting thing here, the third bullet down here, is the website www.grants.gov. That site is updated constantly with new programs, new funding sources, new program requirements, dollar amounts. You should probably put that on your favorites bar on your browser and go there every so often and check what's new, because that's really an important source of information for you. Okay? Next up. Here's another wonderful acronym. Does anyone know what SCADA means? Okay, cool. For those of you who don't, Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition for Delivery Automation. I like Title 16 better, but what it means is they can fund projects that are for those SCADA type of projects, canal lining and piping. There's a picture, groundwater banking, leak detection, irrigation retrofits, and they can also do appliance rebate programs. They just had one in where I live that was very successful about rebate programs. This is the San Luis Canal, where they did some long weir construction and canal lining. One of the things that they talked about on this one is that they reduced leakage by 90% on long-crested weirs. All right. This is the Bay Delta Restoration Water Use Efficiency Grants map and some information about it. This area basically provides drinking water to 2/3 of California. This is the whole Sacramento River Delta region, and it goes all the way down line through the Central California Central Valley. They provide drinking water and irrigation water, so it supports over 4 million acres of farmland and 80% of the commercial fisheries that are in the state. The Cal-Fed Water Use Efficiency Grants, they were started in the Bureau of Reclamation has awarded 59 grants with $53 million being invested, and a great many of those are in California. So a lot of Bureau of Reclamation focus is here in our working areas. They partner with the National Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS. They've got their program requirements. These are the sort of things that you should get in touch with them regarding what their eligibility requirements are for projects and their funding sources as well. Okay, this map is again for eligible applicants under the CalFed solution area must be within this area. So when you go to their website, you'll look at your project area. If it matches up with their eligibility area, this is one of their sources of funding that would be available for your project. The water use efficiency grants. This photo on the top left, that's a leaking pipe, so that you can see that this is for leak detection. And on the bottom right, this was East Bay Municipal Water District in the Oakland area. They found these leaks that cost $1 million in damage and lost water. So small leaks become big leaks. You know how it is when pipes disintegrate and deteriorate and are in need of repair. So these detection grants are very useful, and I'm sure that you can figure that you can go through with your infill and infiltration, water leak detection, doing the video scoping of piping and that sort of thing. So this is a great source. Historically, their range of awards have been from $200,000 to $1.5 million. So again, a great source if that's what your jurisdiction needs, that's what your district needs. This is, in the course of the last 8 or 9 years, over $120 million in federal funding has been awarded to 17 states. And that's a chart that shows you this. The smaller mutual water companies also are well represented through the Bureau. This is the Pelger company, the Pelger Mutual Water Company. They did this kind of canal lining, and again, they saved 300 acre-feet of water per year. And as you recall, an acre-foot is hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. So you can see that in a small system, that kind of savings, water savings, is substantial on the district itself and every user who's paying a monthly water bill. They do advanced water treatment pilot and demonstration projects. That was new to the Water Smart program starting in 2010. And this one also is on a 50-50 cost share. Grants are capped at $600,000 on this program. But again, going to your website, you can find a little more information on this. These are Department of Water and Power from the City of Los Angeles. They received $600,000 in reclamation funding on a total project of 2.2 on each of these projects. So you can see what the capability and how to do multi-layered funding through your grant sources. Here's the Water Smart Cooperative Watershed Management Program to improve water quality and ecological resilience, conserve water, reduce conflicts. So throughout this area, and this is Northern California, Northern and Central. Next up is their Title 16. So this is, I know the suspense has been killing you. This is what Title 16 is all about. The Reclamation partners with, the Bureau partners with non-federal agencies to identify and investigate opportunities, to conduct research, and then fund planning studies and construction so that you can have, better reclamation and reuse of wastewater and the naturally impaired ground and surface waters. There are 37 projects under Title 16 in California. They have funded, as you can see, over $520 million, and that's been leveraged with other funding sources to create $1.7 billion in project funding. So this is a significant source through Bureau of Reclamation. There's a contact there of David White. He's given some of these presentations before at the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And finally, a website is www.usbr.gov. They have, through www.grants.gov, what we at HCD called a NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, they call a FOA, Funding Opportunities Announcement. So you can go to grants.gov to look for FOAs, and you can sign up at both the Bureau or grants.gov so that you will automatically get these announcements so that you know that new funding is coming down the pipeline that might be actually perfectly tailored towards your project. So do keep in touch with them. So that's it for the Bureau of Reclamation. And then next up, we are going to have our last agency, the Department of Water Resources, Leslie Pierce, who is a program manager at DWR.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. A little closer. Okay. I just want to recognize my coworker, Dennis Woods. If you send in one of the California Financing Coordinating Committee funding inquiries, he'll be the person who responds to you. And I'm going to cover the grant and bond financing programs at the Department of Water Resources. We have 4 programs with grant funding in the rest of the 2013, 5 in 2014, and 3 that are continuous solicitations. Money from these grant programs and bond financing programs comes from Prop 84, 1E, 204, 50, 13, and 81. For all our grant programs, local public agencies are eligible to apply. Here are some examples of how we define local public agencies. When I get to the slides for each grant program, I will let you know if anyone else is eligible to apply in addition to the local public agencies. Okay. Our first program is the desalination program. The purpose of the desalination program is the development of local water supplies or water quality through brackish water and seawater desalination. And in addition to local public agencies, these entities are also eligible for funding. There is more than $4.5 million available. And an update since this presentation was put together is that the proposal solicitation package will be released in November or December. And on the last slide for each program, I've listed a website, and you should check all those websites for the most up-to-date information because things seem to constantly change. So here's the website for the desalination program. Our next program is the Drainage Reuse Program. The purpose of this program is to fund research and technical study projects to develop methods to reuse subsurface agricultural drainage water. And an update on this program is the proposal solicitation package or application will be released at the end of this year. Our next program is the Safe Drinking Water Contaminant Removal Technologies Program, and this program funds public water systems and public entities that include universities, state, and federal laboratories. This program funds pilot and demonstration projects that test new contaminant removal technologies and disinfection projects using ultraviolet technology and ozone treatment. There's $10 million available. This is there's no match required for disadvantaged communities or small water systems. There's about $5 million available per project. It's a continuous solicitation, so you can apply now, and I encourage you to go to their website. The next program is the Safe Drinking Water Bond Law of 1988, and this program funds public and private water systems whose projects are designed to improve drinking water so it is pure, wholesome, and drinkable. And right now, the priority for this program is leak detection. There's $6.1 million available, and it can be given out in the form of grants or loans. It's also a continuous solicitation, and there is no website for this program, so please contact Jeremy, and I've given you his contact information. Our next program is the Delta and Sacramento San Joaquin Rivers Water Quality Program. In addition to local public agencies, other entities may collaborate with them, and it includes universities and nonprofits. This program focuses on projects that reduce salinity or other pollutants at agricultural and drinking water intakes in the legal delta, and the projects must have a public benefit. There's $36.6 million available and $20 million per project. An update for this program is that the proposal solicitation package, a draft of that, will be released in December, and their application period has been pushed back to May of 2014. Okay. Now I'm moving into programs that fund flood reduction and protection with other benefits. Within the flood programs, I've loosely grouped them into ones that fund projects throughout the state, and then I'll move into programs that fund projects only in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. The Urban Streams Restoration Program funds projects that reduce property damage from flooding, restoration projects, and projects that promote community involvement. There must be 2 applicants for each grant, a local public agency and a citizens group, and a local public agency and a nonprofit. These are the types of projects they've funded in the past. They include creek cleanups, revegetation efforts, and acquisition of parcels critical for flood management. They have a $1 million per project cap, and this program has pushed their application period back to the end of the year or early 2014. The Flood Control Subventions Program funds implementation of federally authorized flood control projects outside the Central Valley and watershed protection flood prevention projects authorized by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. This program operates under a continuous solicitation, and you can get reimbursement up to 50 to 70% for eligible project costs, and the best source of information is their website. Now I'm going to skip this program because their solicitation has already closed. So I'm moving on to the Urban Flood Risk Reduction Program. The Urban Flood Risk Reduction Program funds 2 types of projects, levee repair and levee improvement projects. This program is not a grant program, but provides bond financing for projects that meet the program's objectives. The projects must be part of the State Plan of Flood Control in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta and protect an urban area. And this program is defining urban area as an area that has a population of greater than or equal to 10,000 people. There's $55 million available, and the guidelines and proposal solicitation package should be out at the end of the year. Our next program is the Delta Levees Program, the Special Flood Control Projects. This program funds flood protection and improvement and habitat restoration projects in the Delta that meet the environmental mitigation requirements of Assembly Bill 360. And let's see. The next proposal solicitation package will be open in early 2014, so not at the end of this year. The local levy assistance programs funds two types of projects: local levy evaluations and local levy critical repairs. These projects must not be part of the state plan of flood control, and they must be outside the delta, and they must protect a non-urban area. So that's an area that has a population of less than 10,000 people. For local levy evaluation projects, there's a $2 million per project cap. They're using Prop 84 funds, and it can fund things like field surveys, hydraulic analyses, lab testing, and environmental permitting. The local levy critical repair projects can get $5 million per project. They're also using Prop 84 funds, and they fund design and improvement and repair of damaged levees. And for both types of projects, the local levy evaluations and the local levy critical repairs, the application period will be in early 2014. The Integrated Regional Water Management Implementation Grants funds projects that meet the long-term state water needs to deliver safe drinking water, flood risk reduction, and protect water quality and the environment. All projects must be consistent with an adopted Integrated Regional Water Management Plan. Local public agencies and nonprofits representing an integrated regional water management effort can apply. The next round of funding will be in 2014. There will be $472 million available. The draft guidelines and proposal solicitation package are scheduled to be released in the summer of 2014, with the final proposal solicitation package released in the fall and applications due in late 2014 or early 2015. So, you know, check their website occasionally to see how they're progressing. And our last program is the Delta Levy Subventions. This program funds Delta Levy System maintenance projects that meet the goals of the CalFed Record of Decision and environmental mitigation requirements of Assembly Bill 360. The next application period is scheduled for June 2014, and that would be work that you would be doing from July 1st, 2014 through June 30th, 2015. And here are a couple websites that can provide you with more information. And I encourage you to come, if you're interested in any of our grant programs or bond financing, please come to our workshop table. There'll be staff from our programs to talk with you directly about your projects. Thank you.
Okay, I always like listening to Leslie's presentation because I try and count up how many millions of dollars are available. I lost track at 170, and then she said 472, and the math just went out of my head, but that's a lot. There's funding available through federal and state sources. California has needs. You all are working on projects or representing districts or jurisdictions that are in need and have them on the table ready to go. This is why you're here. This is why we're here. So we hope this has been helpful today. We're going to wrap up our This wraps up our presentations now. So 3 things to say. Number 1, don't forget your evaluations on the way out the door. If you can put them in the box at the registration table. But number 2 is we now have our breakout session. So for those of you on the web and video cast, thank you for joining. We will look to see questions that either you sent in, we can get back to you individually, or if you submit on the common inquiry form, you'll get 7 responses at a crack every time you send one of those in for a project. So what I'm going to ask all of you here in the room is to grab your stuff. If you've got trash, throw it out. There's some recycling, and of course, there's recycling and trash unit over there. But what we're going to do is we're going to set up our tables real quick, and give us maybe just 10 minutes or so, and then you can come back in and chat with any of the representatives from any of the agencies that you feel you want to get a little bit more information or have questions about which program to use, eligible projects, that sort of thing. On behalf of the California Financing Coordinating Committee, thank you all for attending. Thank you very much for being here today. Good luck with your projects.
So your name